Hi, everyone. My name is Braxton Montier. I'm with UFL TV, and I'm here interviewing Brandon. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction, Braxton. My name's Brandon McBride. I'm a local real estate agent here in the Salt Lake area. Been selling real estate for the last 11 years, personally sold over 400 homes. Um, Three kids, twins on the way, which is exciting for us. And I grew up in a small town near Preston, Idaho, where Napoleon Dynamite was filmed. So that's kind of my claim to fame. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself, Braxton.
Wonderful. Well, I have some questions for you about divorce and real estate and how that all kind of fits together. So, what is your experience with real estate as it relates to divorce?
I guess I might be a good candidate, Braxton, because I've personally gone through a divorce and had to sell real estate at the same time. And so it's a very difficult time for people, very high emotions, very high stress. And then you've got this asset that you need to kind of figure out what you're going to be doing with it. And so typically what I find is, like I mentioned, stress is high, emotions are high, and they need some recommendations from somebody to kind of help them along the way. And that's something I wish that I kind of had when I was going through my divorce. And so I feel like I'm maybe someone that can understand both sides of it because I've personally gone through a divorce myself.
Wonderful. Is it hard to sell a house that was an asset in a divorce?
The short answer is yes and no. If both sides are being very amicable and can work together and can help facilitate the transaction, it can be relatively seamless as long as both parties are on the same page, and both attorneys are on the same page. But if they're not, or attorneys are not on the same page, then it can be very difficult because one party is wanting to do one thing, the other party is wanting to do the other thing, and it can be very difficult. Typically, though, what I find is if somebody is going through a divorce and they have a divorce decree that has been complete, typically that decree is going to outline the steps in which they need to take to list and sell their home. So if there is a divorce decree in place, typically I find it being a little bit simpler, a little bit easier because the divorce decree kind of tells you what you need to do. But if it's
Hmm,
prior to the divorce decree, then it can be a little bit difficult, especially if both sides are not on the same page.
that makes sense. What are the common pitfalls that people can fall into during the selling process of a house for their divorce?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing that I generally find as the biggest pitfalls is pricing,
Yeah.
understanding what price points each party wants to be at. So typically I find one party wants to list their home maybe above market value. The other party's like, hey, let's list it at market value so it markets and sells. The other thing that I typically find is possession and inclusion. So when I mean possession, typically when you sell a home, there can be negotiated a period of time where the home is sold and you can remain in the property. So sometimes that becomes a pitfall. The other thing would be included items, whether that's a washer, a dryer, a refrigerator, or some sort of inclusion like that. Those are typically the biggest things, but generally it comes down to the price point that each party wants to list the home for. The last thing that I'll maybe mention is typically what I find is when folks are going through a divorce, one party has moved out, one party lives in the home. And when that happens, the person that's in the home generally is going to be left with a little bit more work to be done, as they will likely be the person prepping the home, dealing with the showings, dealing with getting the home ready. And that can be a little bit more cumbersome. And so that's where I come in is to try to streamline that process, have you meet with my stager and kind of work through the staging process, making sure that we're taking professional photos so your home shows the best and to try to alleviate as much stress as possible for both parties. But those are the common pitfalls I typically see.
Okay. Has there ever been a time where the parties in a divorce case have actively worked against you during the selling process, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, I have an example I'm actually dealing with right now where the parties are kind of working against me, but the attorneys and how they had it outlined in the divorce decree was to work with me as their real estate agent. And so really what it comes down to at that point, Braxton, is we fall back on just to what the divorce decree says. So again, emotions are going to be high, frustrations are going to be high, and that's understandable because I felt the exact same way during my divorce, but we just kind of have fallen back on, okay, What you're saying is valid. Your emotions and feelings are 100% valid. Now we just need to remember what are the facts and what is the divorce decree stating, and there's a timeline that divorce decree has that we need to follow. And so we just kind of fall back on the divorce decree. And the other thing that kind of mentioned on that, Braxton, is the title company here in Utah. We typically use a title company to help facilitate transactions. They're also going to fall back on that divorce decree as well. So that's going to kind of help alleviate some of the pitfalls and challenges and hurdles we're going to jump over because the divorce decree will tell us what we kind of need to do.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that the price is one of the sticking points that a lot of people have. Do you have a hard time convincing people of the actual value of their home?
Yeah, great question, Braxton. And I typically I don't love the word convince because it feels like I'm the one saying you got to do this, you got to do that. So typically, how I will present that is I'll say, okay, we've got to convince three people of the value of your home. Sellers, the buyer, they've got to be convinced of the value, else they're not going to submit an offer. The buyer is likely going to have a real estate agent, we call a buyer's agent. So we have to convince that party because the buyer is going to ask their real estate agent, hey, what should we offer? And three, the appraiser. So we've got to convince those three people. And so what we do when I meet with folks that are looking to sell their home is I bring my computer and I show them all of the comparable sales, typically within the last 6 months that are similar in condition and similar in quality. And based on that, we're saying, okay, these 7 homes have sold between 490 and 510. I mean, that's going to give us a really good range on kind of where our list price should be. So that'll give us a foundation. That's kind of first step. The second step is generally we're going to look at, okay, these are the homes that have sold in the last 6 months, similar. Now let's pay attention to what is active on the market. So right now we're running into there's a high level of inventory on the market right now. And so there's a lot of properties that we're competing against. So if there's one home in the community, not a big deal. There's not a ton of competition. If
Yeah.
there's 75 homes in the community, which happens more frequently than you would think within a mile or two radius, 75
Wow.
homes being available, that's pretty common. Then we need to say, okay, 490 to 510 is kind of the price, but there's 75 other homes that we need to compare that we're competing against. We need to factor that in. And then the last thing is obviously we are going to market your property. So we spend, 20 to $23,000 a month in marketing to market and sell our clients' homes. So we sell over 100 homes a year. And so what that allows us to do is generate a ton of activity and showings. And what we do, Braxton, is based on the feedback, based on the activity, based on the marketing, we are going to know, okay, we have generated 30, 50, 80,000 views on your house, and we only have one showing. And that one showing gave us feedback that they felt like we were overpriced and there's other homes that were more compelling than our home. So based on the data, we're going to say, okay, it's not me convincing. It's like, hey, no, look, here's the information, here's the facts. Based on the data, we need to make an adjustment based on what the market's yielding. And then obviously we'll look at interest rates. So that's typically how we would want to have that conversation is provide the information to the client so they can make an educated decision like, okay, yeah, you're kind of making sense. Like, okay, we're priced here. We're not getting the feedback, but we're getting activity. We're probably above where the market's yielding today. So that's kind of how we approach it.
Wonderful. Um, with divorce, how does that change the overall structure of a deal to sell a house that was an asset in a marriage?
There's not a ton of differences in the structure. It's really going to come down to who's on the title, right? So sometimes there's only one party on the title, so only one person would be signing. Sometimes both parties are on the title, so both people would be signing. So that's going to be relatively the same. There's really nothing that's going to be that different. The big thing is typically at closing, there's going to be a lump sum of money that's going to need to be distributed to each party. Again, falling back to the divorce decree, it might be 50-50. It might be 70-30. It might be 80-20. However that's structured, we work with a title company that's going to say, okay, based on the decree, it's 50-50. So you're making $100,000 total equity. Each person gets their 50,000 and the title company will individually wire that money out to them. But in regards to anything that's different in regards to structuring or paperwork, it's going to be very similar. There's not going to be really any differences there.
Well, good. How long does it usually take for a house to be sold that was an asset in a divorce? And does that change if that the case is pending or if the case has already been dealt with?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. What I'm seeing right now is, at least in Salt Lake County, average days on market is about 57 days. For us, it's about 27 days. And so the time frame for divorce sale shouldn't vary too much from kind of the normal statistics, unless, for example, I've had divorce cases in the past where one and the divorce decree hasn't been in line yet and it hasn't been solidified. One party wants to list their home, call it for 600,000, but the values are really 550. Yeah, that home's going to sit on the market for quite a long time just because we're not in line with the market. But if everybody's in line and on the same page regarding pricing, because the marketing we do will work, then yeah, you should expect, your home to be under contract within 30 to 45 days. If you have a real estate agent that is marketing your home, spending the money on marketing and getting your home exposed to the masses, 30 to 45 days should be realistic as long as both parties are on the same page.
Wonderful. So, do you enjoy working on real estate that was associated with divorce?
Personally, I do. And the reason I say that is I just feel like I can relate. I've gone through a divorce myself back in 2016, and it was just difficult. And I just wish I had somebody at the time that maybe had gone through the same scenario that I had, right? Because we
Yeah,
had a kid, and so we were dealing with that as well. And so I enjoy working with people that are going through a divorce just because I feel like I can relate and I can understand, maybe not own 100% their situation, but I had similar emotions. I had similar feelings. And so, yes, I personally do enjoy working with the folks that have gone through divorce because I feel like I can help navigate them through the process, understand their emotions, and really kind of get them from point A to point Z and understanding both persons' perspective. And I feel like I have a really good, ability to do that. But again, that's just because I've gone through a divorce personally.
absolutely. When people go through divorce, most often it's their first time, and so they really don't know what's going on. They don't really have any kind of exposure to it, and so I can see how having somebody who has gone through the process and kind of help guide you through it would be really invaluable.
Sure, sure. And I agree. I just feel like it's selling a house and buying a house, whatever you're doing, it's in a very emotional process and it's stressful. It's one of the top 10 most stressful things, people do. I read an article on that, several years back. At least that's what the article said. And but yeah, divorce on top of that, and maybe there's kids involved. I mean, and maybe one party doesn't live in the property anymore, right? There's just so many juggling parts. And so to have somebody that you feel comfortable, whether it's me or another agent that's maybe has the ability to help you navigate and juggle all of those moving parts can be helpful because your real estate agent should be able to take a lot of that stress off of you, should be able to help you with, the preparation of your home, the marketing, giving you recommendations on what to do. Specifically, how do they negotiate the real estate transaction for both parties to make sure that they're both getting as much as what they want as possible, right? So there's a lot of moving parts. So to have
Yeah,
somebody that can help you, I think is very important.
absolutely. How can people help you during the process of selling their house? What are some of the most useful things that they can do besides, having a divorce decree already?
This may sound simple, but the
Mhm.
most important thing for me to understand is your goals and open lines of communication about what is happening. So, for example, I had a client that was going through a divorce, but they didn't let me know that they had to be moved into another property by a certain deadline and certain date. So I was just unaware. I just really need people to be as transparent, as brutally honest as they can, because the more information I have, again, I'm a fiduciary, I'm going to represent them. But the more information I have, the better that I can serve them, whether that's getting them simple contractors, whether that's getting them into another property, helping them, find another place to live, whatever it is. That's probably the biggest thing, Braxton, is I need to understand the situation. I need transparency, and I'll provide
Yeah,
transparency on my side because now I have all of the information about what's happening in your family, so I can make sure I get you what you want in the time that you want. So that's probably the number one thing.
wonderful. Well, that was the last question that I had. If somebody is going through a divorce, where can they find you? How can they get your help?
Yeah, that's great. You can reach out to me directly. My phone number is 801-706-8832. You can also go to my website, which is mcbridebrandon.com. That's a great way to connect with me. You can kind of see, what my team and I do. You can also take a look at my social media platforms too. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and whatnot too. So you can connect with me on those platforms, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Again, it can be just a no fee, no cost consultation just to answer questions. So whether we do business or not, that's totally okay. But again, use me as a resource, ask me questions. I've gone through what you're going through, and it's a tough emotional thing to go through. So use me as a resource and reach out with any questions for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Braxton.